This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hi, this is Jane Garvey. Thank you for downloading the Woman's Hour podcast from Monday, the 12th of November 2018. On the podcast today, what do we know, if anything, about the lives of women in the Anglo-Saxon period in Britain? We'll discuss There She Goes. It's a BBC4 show, the story of a family life effectively dominated by Rosie, a 9-year-old girl with a learning disability. Now, some people think the programme is brilliant. Other people have some concerns about the way family life is portrayed in it. But we're asking this morning just how helpful that programme has been and indeed how accurate, and some really interesting contributions on that one. So I hope you can take the time to listen to that. But we started today with the impact of Michelle Obama. Her book is out next week, her autobiography. It's called Becoming. And there has been absolutely gazillions of pre-publicity about this, largely about some of the revelations contained within the book about the Obamas going for marriage guidance counselling and having IVF. And Michelle has also talked very frankly about the impact of a miscarriage. She is coming to Britain as part of her publicity tour. She's doing a big event at the South Bank Centre on December the 3rd. You might be interested in going. Well, tough luck, because tickets have long since sold out and some of them are now exchanging hands for thousands of pounds. I talked this morning to Clarissa Pubby, who met Mrs. Obama as a student in 2011. She's executive producer of the book's podcast Mostly Lit, and she works in publishing. I talked too to Natalie Moore, Southside reporter on Chicago's public radio station WBEZ. First of all, here's Clarissa. I asked her exactly what she did for a living.
So my job title is Senior Marketing Manager, and I work at a publishing company called Bonnier Books. I used to work for Penguin Random House.
Right, OK. So you've got the career you perhaps might not have had or might not have been expected to have. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd definitely say that.
Yeah, OK, good stuff. Well, we'll hear more about that later. Let's first of all go to Chicago and Natalie Moore, who is Southside reporter on Chicago's public radio station WBEZ. Natalie, I know it's the very early hours of the morning. Welcome to the programme. Thank you for talking to us. How are you?
Good morning. My pleasure.
Tell us a little bit then about the impact of Michelle in the States and the way people feel about her, or the way some people feel about her.
Michelle Obama is quite popular right now, and she's had a journey over the past decade. When she was first on the stage, there were some people who labeled her the trope, the angry black woman. She was emasculating her husband. There were pretty vicious attacks from the right wing about how she looked. But on the other hand, there were people who saw her as every day. They liked her fashion, how she could mix the high end with a piece from Target, which is a big box store here in the States. She also opened up the White House, calling it the People's House, and invited children in, did a garden, and really put an emphasis on arts and music and culture, and bringing in people to the White House who wouldn't normally get in. Since the Obamas have left office, she has remained popular, and people are very excited about her book, which officially drops tomorrow.
Now, have you read it? Have you seen it?
I've seen some excerpts, and she's going to be doing a lot here in Chicago. This is where she's from. You know, there's a special kind of pride for her here in Chicago. You know, she's seen as a girl of the South Side. She's from a black neighborhood, working class, and has had a remarkable career even before she was First Lady. She went to Princeton for undergrad. She has a law degree from Harvard. And she always talked about how her family kept her rooted and kept her grounded. And so tomorrow night, the kickoff is her book tour, and she will be in conversation with her friend Oprah. But she's also doing an event in her neighborhood where the Obamas still have a house. Tickets went on sale yesterday. They sold out within about 5 hours. She's going to be at her local bookstore.
Right.
And
well, she's still, I mean, you've illustrated, she clearly still has massive appeal. There are some cynical voices out there. are people carping about the money spinning aspect of all this? Do you get a lot of that, Natalie?
The money spinning as far as what?
Well, not all of this money is going to go to charity. Some of it is. I get that.
Right. Oh, you mean from the ticket sales from her events? Yes, the tickets are quite steep. The most expensive ones are in U.S. dollars, more than $2,500. I have wondered if that criticism has allowed her team to start giving away tickets. So what was announced later is that tickets to community groups in each city will be given away. But yes, there are people who feel like these tickets are not accessible to everyday people.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie. Stay with us if you don't mind. Let's bring in Clarissa, because I've heard about other young women who have been in contact with Michelle Obama, who've been mentored by her. What does it actually mean? What happened?
So I guess I'd probably want to start with the backstory, I guess. And the story kind of starts a couple of years before I met Michelle Obama, and Michelle's first international solo event as First Lady was a visit to a state school in North London, and that school, that amazing school, happened to be my secondary school. And I wasn't there at the time that she visited, but like everyone, and especially as a young black woman, I was in awe of what a visit from the first African-American First Lady signified. And she was really inspired by the girls, and I think saw some of their story in her own. And when she visited the UK for the next time, she wanted to do something really special for them at Oxford University. I was a student in my second year at Oxford. I was also a digital editor for Penguin, for young people, and the president of the Poetry Society. And Michelle heard about my story and my accomplishments, and she and her team reached out to me to see if I would be part of this immersion and mentoring day that she was organising.
So in simple terms, she took an interest in you, but she kept up the interest.
Yeah, I think that what it kind of meant, and I guess the impact, and I guess what she'd seen is, I guess, her journey as a student, and perhaps understanding some of the challenges and the difficulties that people have. So she not only, I guess, wanted me to be involved, but also wanted me to give a speech alongside her as part of a Q&A that she hosted. And she really involved the young pupils, the girls, and got them sort of asking her questions. And I think her answers not only were relevant to them as the young students then, but I think she was also mindful that this event would be seen, and she was keen that it was recorded and put on YouTube so that people could, I think, take that inspiration and some of that encouragement that she kind of just instills quite effortlessly.
So from what we know about the book, Becoming, which is out soon in Britain, the revelations have been about marriage guidance, about IVF. Now, some people would think, it's too much oversharing. By the way, it doesn't mean they're uninterested when they say that, but they might well say it. What do you think about what you know so far about what's going to be in this book?
I haven't read the book myself, but as you've said, I've seen some of the coverage and the excerpts, and I think for me, at least, on a personal level, it's the first time I've ever seen a black woman in the public eye and the public sphere speak about those issues, and I think so much of Michelle Obama's message has been around success and
apparently effortless success. Apparently,
I don't think she. I don't think it's effortless. I think it's about hard work.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Now we find out that actually, as with all our lives, it wasn't as simple as we might have thought.
Yes, but I do think if you listen to kind of what she says, and she talks very openly about challenges and kind of difficulties. I think in all of when I met her, she was very kind of open about that, and I think in other things I've seen. So I think it's an extension of the message she's been putting out as well, because I think she's given the story and the gloss, but also the backstory as well.
Yeah, it is interesting that she talked openly about the fact that she and Barack Obama had been for marriage guidance counselling. Let's briefly bring in Peter Saddington, who works for Relate. He's in our studio in Derby. Peter, is it significant and important that a woman this successful, this high profile, and apparently this brilliantly, happily married as well, has acknowledged that there have been problems in the past?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think for any relationship, good and successful, they've got to have been tested at some time. They will have experienced difficulties. And to be honest about it and acknowledge it, when you're living such a high-profile life, almost like in a goldfish bowl, everybody can see you all the time. I think it's pretty impressive that you're prepared to say you've had difficulties and what you've done about it.
Yeah, obviously many people go for marriage guidance when it's too late, and it might have been entirely better to follow the example of the Obamas and get stuck in much earlier on.
That's true. And relationship counselling nowadays, a lot of people are coming before they've reached crisis point. You're not really going to come out and start talking to somebody unless you have got a problem. But I think increasingly more people recognise the value of counselling and do come forward and do seek help. And I think if you come early enough, you have a much better chance of changing something. So like the Obamas, if you recognise you've got a problem, you acknowledge it, it's quite often an awful lot easier to do it in a counselling situation with somebody else, because doing it at home, the emotions start getting pretty high. It's very hard to sort something when you're angry and upset. But having somebody else there can make a big difference at being able to understand what the problem's about.
Peter, thank you very much. Briefly, back to Chicago and Natalie. Are there some people in the States, Natalie, who don't like this oversharing element of Michelle Obama's story, or is everybody glad that she's getting this difficult stuff out there?
I'm sure that there's some people who don't like it, but I can say that when some of this news first hit on Friday, Twitter was aflame, particularly from Black women who were like, "We don't talk about reproductive issues. We keep these things bottled up." Because she also talked about having a miscarriage. So I think that dialogue has been really helpful for women who felt like they were alone. Last night, there was a 1-hour special on the ABC network with her and Robin Roberts, and she talked about this. Like, we have to be more open. We shouldn't sit in silence, whether it's a miscarriage, or she'd even addressed the marriage counseling, that young couples think that they're doing this alone, or that people haven't had these type of problems. And you have to find that space to be able to talk about it.
Really appreciate your company and your insight, Natalie. Thank you very much indeed. And I hope she gets back to sleep, poor woman. That's Natalie, who is in Chicago this morning in the wee small hours. Just very, very briefly, Clarissa, the idea that young women, black, white, every ethnicity, needs to address the issue of fertility. It isn't always got out there, is it, in the way it should be?
Yes, I suppose so. And I think two things. I think that obviously, as we've talked about, when we think about Michelle, we think about success. But I think obviously linked to success and kind of having a career and thinking about your future as a woman, if you do want to have a family, obviously it's very important to be thinking about that. But equally, I do think some of the messages that have come out have been around sharing your story, and that being important, at least a takeaway that I take away from it all. And I think even in meeting her, she was very keen that we learn about the importance of talking about our stories. So yeah. I think whatever it is we have to share, not being afraid to do that for ourselves, but also to help other people and just start conversations. Is there a danger, and I know I'm in danger now, sounding very cynical, but the event, for example, in the Royal Festival Hall in December is likely to be full of, well, people with money, to put it mildly, and the sort of liberal classes who like to be thought of as in touch with what's going on. You know what I'm saying, that there perhaps won't be very many young women of colour able to go, in fact, to that event. Well, I think that, I didn't organise the event, I'm not involved in it. So, but I think that the question about, making assumptions about what the audience will be like, I think there's definitely a point there that, who gets to go, but equally I do think that the more interesting question and about, like you said, is she sort of being, is it sort of packaged for this liberal class and white and middle class audiences who is doing the organisation and who is doing that packaging. And I think regardless of whoever the audience is, Michelle doesn't really shy away from who she is and her message and who she's speaking to directly. So I think that's also really important to remember. And I think it's actually an opportunity. It speaks to, I think, a wider structural issue within the media and publishing industry as a whole. And that's why it's very important to have more young people and specifically black women within these institutions being part of how that is shaped and who the audience is. Because if the people and the industry as a whole is itself, quite white and middle class and liberal, as you said, then it's not unsurprising that they would have the kind of ideas that would place someone within that space and within that audience. I think it's an opportunity for people to listen as well and collaborate more with, audiences and specifically black women. And there are lots of fantastic, I think, organisations and people who were involved in that conversation online, such as, the Mostly Lit podcast or Galdem or, Kelechi Okafor. And there are fantastic platforms doing incredible things to reach these women. So it's a learning, I think, for people. Well, yes, as well.
Yeah, let's hope that the right people do get to see her, because I'm sure she would be inspirational. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Clarissa. You're listening to Woman's Hour. Good morning to you. You can get involved at BBC Woman's Hour on Twitter if you'd like to have your say, particularly on the next subject when we're talking about the representation of people with learning disabilities on television. We'll get on to that in a moment. First of all, it was, as you might well know, Equal Pay Day on Saturday, and Woman's Hour's made a video with Jo Swinson, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats. Jo wants to see a change in the workplace when it comes to gender equality.
Over the past few years, there's been this new wave of feminist activity. We've had campaigns like Me Too, but these are big and difficult issues, and we need everybody to get involved in the cause. This is a great time to be doing so. I think one of the things that we can all do is to look out for each other and support each other. So it might be if you're at work in a meeting, you make sure that when a woman makes a good point, you back her up. You say, yes, that was a great point that Jane made, and you reinforce it so she gets credit, because we all know about the times when a woman says something, it's ignored, and then 5 minutes later, a man claims it as his own and he gets the credit for it. We know there's still significant pregnancy discrimination, 54,000 women a year losing their jobs. Make sure you get informed about what your rights are. You have significant legal rights. Use that information to challenge something with an employer when they're getting it wrong. And if you can get support from others in your workplace, so much the better. Supporting each other is incredibly important for creating change.
Jo Swinson, Liberal Democrats, Deputy Leader, of course, at the moment, and more advice for her in full in a video on the Woman's Hour website. Of course, you can subscribe to Woman's Hour now on BBC Sounds. If you subscribe to the podcast, there's additional material every day, and there certainly will be today. And the Woman's Hour podcast drops at the useful time of about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's perfect for a late afternoon dog walk, or you can listen in the middle of the night, whenever suits you. We're very happy as long as you listen. That's all we care about. Now we can talk to Laura Rutherford, who is in our studio in Glasgow. Laura, good morning to you.
Hi there.
Really keen to get you on the programme today, because I was reading about you at the end of last week. You have campaigned after, well, it's taken you 3 years, but you've won in the end, to get Tesco to stock nappies for older children. Now, tell me why you wanted to do this.
Well, when my son Brody was 4, he was outgrowing the nappies that were available in supermarkets, and we weren't actually entitled to the continent service and products from them until he was 5. So the only option really for us was to shop online, and all of the nappies online are really expensive. So it gave me a push really to ask. I asked Tesco first of all on Facebook if they'd consider making bigger nappies, and then I started a petition.
Can you just tell me a bit about Brody?
Yeah, sure. Brody is nearly 7 and he is undiagnosed. He has an undiagnosed genetic condition. He has autism and epilepsy. And thankfully is a pretty happy-go-lucky little guy.
But nevertheless, inevitably, he has requirements, and I'm interested in the fact that he fell through the net. There was this gap here between the ages of 4 and 5.
Yeah, The continence service is great, but it's a bit of a postcode lottery.
Right.
Referral age, waiting time, the kind of number of nappies you receive is a bit inconsistent.
Can you explain how you get them? You say the continence service. Is this via your NHS trust?
Yes, it is where I live. So my health visitor referred Brodie when he was 5, and it took about 8 months for us to get nappies.
8 months?
Yeah.
And what did you do in the meantime? You had to fork out, obviously, for...
Yeah, or squeeze him into size 6.
Yeah, and that's the problem, because squeezing in is uncomfortable for him, and I guess also impractical. Yeah, okay, well, we all know the consequences of that. So Tesco, initially, were they responsive?
They responded on Facebook, and then it was kind of a brief response, and I started a petition, and then actually in March 2016 they contacted me, so quite a long time ago, but quite early on in the process.
And the other supermarkets?
Nothing from them.
Nothing yet?
No.
I can't believe that after this they won't come round to also... simply, it's a service. Clearly there are people who need them.
Yeah, I think there's such a big gap, and I think with any kind of specialist product there's a disability price tag, and what I love about Tesco is that they've not included that with the nappies. They're a reasonable price, and it's handy for people to be able to go into a store and buy them and not spend over the odds and have to wait for an online delivery.
I guess you weren't the only person in the end campaigning on this one, Laura. Did a lot of people try and get on board with you?
I had over 18,000 people sign the petition, which is brilliant.
Yeah, and presumably some of them, though not all, with exactly the same issue.
Yeah, lots of people.
All right, Laura, can you stay with us? Because I think, have you seen the programme on BBC4, There She Goes?
I've watched a couple of episodes. It's a bit close to home for me.
Well, yeah, that was the question I was going to put to our other contributors, but thank you. If you stay with us for the time being, and congratulations, because it does take people like you sticking your head above the parapet and agitating a bit to get change. So congratulations, I do think that was brilliant. There She Goes, in case you don't know, is a show on BBC4, and it's about a family of 4, mum and dad and 2 children. There's a son, and then there's Rosie, who is a 9-year-old girl with a learning disability. We're really interested in whether you, if you've watched the programme, what you think about this, whether you think it's an accurate representation of what it's like to be this family. This is a clip from episode 2, and the mother, who's played by Jessica Hines, and the dad, David Tennant, are trying to brush 9-year-old Rosie's teeth.
Can you just brush her teeth?
I know, we can both do that.
But I've got to put these on. Okay.
You know, the dentist said when we finally do the hygienist, she's going to need a general anaesthetic. That's a professional toothbrusher insisting on knocking her unconscious.
You've got to have a strategy.
I've started using 2 brushes.
Come on, Rosie. Time for paste.
Come on.
Girl.
Come on, Rosie. It's only paste. You drink a puddle.
So you bite down on that, and then Mummy can clean in here. What a clever Mummy.
Still a 2-person job, isn't it? It's impossible to do this on your own.
You just need to think creatively, Si. You don't actually mean impossible, do you?
Yeah, literally impossible.
Okay, but when I have to go in the faculty in the morning and you have to get ready for the bus, I mean, you brush your teeth then, don't you?
It's hard. I usually do it.
Bad daddy.
That's it.
In case you haven't seen it then, just a brief glimpse into the world of the family in the BBC4 show There She Goes. Still available on iPlayer, obviously, if you haven't seen it. I have to say, episode 4 is amongst the best television I think I've ever seen. Perhaps that's over-egging it slightly, but no, maybe not. It really was incredibly moving. Carly Jones is a disability activist who has autism. Good to see you, Carly. Thank you for being here. Also has 2 daughters who have the condition. In fact, you have 3 daughters, 2 of whom have the condition,
That's
I should
right,
say. Yeah. And Louise Dyson is the founder of Visable People. That's a casting agency which aims to promote the representation of disabilities in TV and film. Louise is in our Worcester studio this morning. Louise, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And of course we have Laura Rutherford still with us as well. Laura, Carly said this show was a bit too close to home. What do you think about it?
Actually, the part where the toothbrushing commences was the part that got me in tears. Very, very close to home. It's so clear that this has been written or directed by somebody who was in that room when that happened. It's incredibly well done, and my only complaint is that it wasn't on BBC One prime time to make more parents feel less alone.
Yes, I have wondered why it's on BBC Four. I can only assume that the language, which I think is perhaps, well, it's entirely accurate.
Yes,
but at times is perhaps something that wouldn't be allowed on BBC One. But anyway,
perhaps,
why it couldn't be on BBC Two, I do not know.
Yeah.
When we'll talk to Laura in a moment, but the too close to home business means, I guess, we'll find out from her whether she found it too uncomfortable. You didn't find it too uncomfortable?
No. And I think the reason being is because my daughter, who had the trouble with the teeth brushing, is now a young adult. Had I have maybe watched it when she was actually going through those issues, that would have been a lot harder. But in hindsight, it made me cry because it was a relief, and also as a single parent as well, without having the extra person to hold the second toothbrush, I felt less guilty about how tricky it was, and I think shows like this really can help the isolation. And of course, I've kind of got a foot in each camp, if you like, because not only do I have a disability, I'm a parent of children with disabilities. So it was very, very interesting to watch it from that perspective.
Yes, what we should say, of course, is that the parents, there are two parents, and I'm glad you made that point.
Yeah.
They are both healthy and able, and they have a very nice house.
Yes.
They live in a very nice area, but they are still severely up against it. And
Yes.
their relationship suffers too, and we see that, we get to see and hear that. Does that ring bells with you?
It does, and I'm actually very glad that the family have everything which you would kind of think was going for them, as of having the nice house and having two parents, because had it have been perhaps done with a single parent and maybe not such a nice big house in London or whatever, it may have been like, oh well, they were having difficulties because of something else. And I think it's quite important that it was like, actually this is really tough for everyone regardless of what you've got going for you in life.
Yeah. Laura, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really good to see a programme that's representing our families, because it's our normal. But it's quite hard watching sometimes. I suppose it just reminds me of things that I've been through with Brodie. The baby classes at the start was something I didn't enjoy doing at all.
Tell me about that.
I think it was a time Brodie's undiagnosed, like Rosie is, and it took quite a long time for professionals and family members even to kind of see what I saw. And baby classes were hard because I knew something was different, but nobody else did, I suppose. And it's watching other kids develop and your own child not, and missing the milestones and those kind of things which are difficult in the beginning.
And can I ask, are you a single parent or are you part of a couple, Laura?
No, I've got my other half, who's brilliant.
Right,
Really
but nevertheless we are shown in There She Goes that the couple, well, I mean, we all have our young, carefree pub-going days, and then all of a sudden, not so much, and that's heightened if your child has some problems.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really lucky. My mum has a background in working in a specialist school, and she's brilliant with Brodie. But if I didn't have my mum, I don't think we'd be able to go out at all, because it's hard to be able to trust people to look after him, because you need eyes in the back of your head, quite frankly.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it. Louise, you're somebody who, your casting agency will you tell me actually how it operates and how many people you've got on your books?
Ooh, everybody asks that question in terms of how many people. A lot of people. We've got about a dozen leading actors with different learning disabilities, but altogether we've probably got about, oh heavens, I suppose a nucleus of about 40 people who do most of the work, 40, 50 people maybe.
And you've seen There She Goes. Are you happy with it? That's a very open question, but tell me.
I think it's fantastic to see such high-quality drama, which includes a portrayal of disability. Fundamentally, the problem we've got is that there just isn't enough work, either commissioned or written, portraying people with any kind of disability.
Go on, tell me more.
Really, we need to see people in the everyday situations that people actually live in. We need something a little bit more like real life. Quite often the storylines are about disability. In fact, almost always they're about disability. And that means that it's very hard to place people in everyday roles. It depends obviously on their disability, but the case of somebody with a learning disability, you've got people who have, most people these days with learning disabilities have the option to work in all sorts of different jobs. And that's just something that's not seen. So if in everyday drama we've got people who are included, could be the person who works in the shop, it could be the person who's a hospital porter, the person who's, a member of bar staff, just everyday people where their disability is not pertinent to the storyline.
Right.
That's what we need.
Right. What is certainly true of There She Goes is that it is a story about, it is not seen through the prism of Rosie. It is seen through what Rosie does to the rest of the family, isn't it? Would that be a criticism you would make, Louise?
It's not a criticism, because that's real life. It's just one aspect of real life, and disability is not all about, as you think it might be in terms of the drama that we see. It's not about moments of disaster. That's actually a relatively small part of life. It's everybody has moments of disaster with their kids. It's really, I'd say that we need a more accurate portrayal of the way real life is for people with disabilities.
Yes, perhaps I didn't phrase that properly. I suppose I'm basically trying to ask when we'll make a programme that is not about what the Rosies of families do to the family, but about what Rosie makes of her family.
Golly.
In other words, Carly, do you understand what I'm getting at?
I absolutely agree with you. Although There She Goes is very clearly not about that, and it's still fantastic in its own right, we definitely need to have things from the disabled person's perspective.
But yes, that's what I meant.
It can make us feel incredibly isolated if everything on TV was about the burden we are to our families. That could be quite depressing for us. We definitely. I'm autistic, for example. I've yet to see an adult portrayal of someone like me on TV. I would like them to have a mortgage, a job, a sex life. All of these things, we're normally infantilised, or we are geniuses, or male, or serial killers. There's not this kind of true reflection of autism for me to go.
That way, it is a bit bleak.
Yes.
And so you're still looking. I mean, there have been. What about is it the A word?
Yes, absolutely, of course. But there are a few things, but that again is more of a parental aspect there. We do need, and it again, it's a very cliche stereotype of autism. But if we look at Big Bang Theory, you don't have to go, oh, by the way, Sheldon's autistic. It's so obvious. We don't need... We could have a woman in her 30s or 40s in EastEnders who comes in, but the way she acts and the things that happen, her vulnerabilities, really show that she's an autistic woman getting on with life. And I think that's incredibly important. Scope, if anyone wants to look at Scope website, they did some research and said that only 2.5% of on-screen representations features a disabled person. And they're doing things for disabled adults and children. They've got a petition at the moment for a minister for disabled children and their families. But we do need to get it right, because I think it gives the general public who maybe don't have disabilities or family members of disabilities a chance to rethink what disability is.
Yes.
It helps employment. We need employers to employ us. And particularly, a lot of us choose the arts. And there are many, many fantastically talented disabled actors not getting those roles at the minute. So, very, very passionate subject.
Can I give an example?
Yes, go on.
Which is an excellent example of where they really got it right.
Go on.
It was a woman's hour drama. The Pursuits of Darlene Files, I think, was excellent.
It's interesting you say that, because it's only back today.
Oh, that's a bit of luck. But
no, it isn't. I do apologise. It isn't. I've just been told it isn't. I thought... It's actually D for Dexter, which is about which is our Children in Need drama, which I have to say is also very good, because sometimes there have been criticisms of the Woman's Hour drama. Not from me, she said vaguely.
There's
Carry on.
A fantastic Radio 4 drama which was called First World Problems. That was this year, with one of the lead actors is Sam Barnard, who's one of our fantastic learning disabled actors. That was wonderful.
Well, I wonder. I mean, I take your point about Darlene Files, by the way. Might it be more, I'm trying to be careful how I say this, more practical to do radio drama from that perspective than television drama?
Absolutely not. I think, honestly, it will make a very big difference when directors and producers have the confidence to cast disabled actors, learning disabled actors, in lead roles and really trust them to deliver an authentic portrayal of a character.
Well, OK, well, that then brings me on to the incredible young actress who plays Rosie in There She Goes. She does not have learning disabilities, Carly. So is that all right?
I personally think that is okay, and I think she is a wonderful actress. However, I do believe that the makers of the show were trying to make it accessible for a actually disabled person to play Rosie, but obviously with schedules being quite hectic and it wasn't seen as possible. So what we really need to do is make the timetable and the working and the set, we need to make that accessible to make that happen, if possible. But it's very different when it's a very, very young child. There are obviously considerations to be made, but when it's coming to kind of teenagers and upwards, I don't see why the accessibility should be an issue anymore.
Well, let's give the final word to Laura. What do you think about that, about accessibility, about simply making people with disabilities at the heart of their own story?
Yeah, I think that's really important. Access is a thing that I'm really passionate about, and I think lots of people, like Carly as well, in similar shoes, it's something we all campaign for, and it's an accurate portrayal, and it's the fair kind of thing to do. I think it's an important thing to raise, and it's something that should really, change, I suppose.
Yeah, well, you've brought about your own change, and again, well done to you, Laura. Thank you very much. That's Laura Rutherford, who's in our studio in Glasgow. My thanks to Carly and to Louise as well. Thank you. That was really interesting. And keep your thoughts coming at BBC Woman's Hour on Twitter, or you can email us via the website. There's a new exhibition at the British Library. It's called Anglo-Saxon Kingdoms, Art, Word and War. And the curator is Dr. Claire Bray. Welcome to the programme, Claire.
Thank you.
So the truth is, we don't know a heck of a lot about anybody's life in the Middle Ages, but we know almost nothing about women. Is that still true?
Well, in our Anglo-Saxon Kingdoms exhibition at the British Library, we're looking at 600 years of the history and literature, art and culture of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, and we're really trying to engage visitors with the original evidence that survives, both in handwritten books and in documents and charters and letters and in archaeological objects, and to get people to think about how you can use that evidence to build up a picture of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, because so much has been lost.
Well, so much has been lost, but things occasionally come to the surface, don't they, quite literally, and there have been some monumental discoveries relatively recently.
That's right, and the exhibition includes some fantastic discoveries that have been made in the 21st century, including the Staffordshire hoard, which was discovered by a metal detectorist just outside Lichfield in 2009, and also from Lichfield, the Lichfield Angel, which is a wonderful stone sculpture of the angel Gabriel that was discovered in 2003 during excavations under the floor, under the nave of Lichfield Cathedral. But there's other objects in the exhibition as well that do give us a glimpse of evidence about women. So things like the Lovedon Hill urn, that's a cremation pot, an earthenware pot, and 1,800 of these urns have been found at Lovedon Hill in the east of England, and only one of them has an inscribed name on it, and this one has the name of a woman, Sithabad, inscribed in runes. And so we don't know whether that was the name of the woman who made the pot, or probably more likely the name of the woman whose the remains of whose bones were placed in the pot.
And you found a woman's will. Now, this is really intriguing, because a lot of people would make the assumption women didn't make wills because they had nothing to leave anybody.
Yeah, I think one of the most popular items in the exhibition has been Winflad's will. Winflad was quite a noble woman who died probably around the 940s. She lived in the southwest of England, and her will is far from being the most beautiful object in the exhibition. It's written on a single sheet of parchment. It's got holes in it and stains on it, but it gives us an incredible picture of this woman's life. It's the earliest will that we have for a woman from Anglo-Saxon England, and it tells us about the lands and farms that she owned, her horses, her slaves. She owned a red tent. It tells us about hangings in her house. We can see what we had on her table. It describes gold-adorned wooden cups, and we can look inside her wardrobe. She has what's described as a badger skin gown and a linen gown and black tunics, and we can see her jewellery. She gives to her daughter Athelflaed a brooch and a bracelet which have perhaps been passed down from her own mother. But perhaps most intriguingly of all, she mentions her books, and she says that she leaves her books not to her son but to her daughter Athelflaed.
Right, so giving us the information that her daughter could read, she could read, and they owned books.
Yeah, and of course we don't know what these books were. Books were expensive to produce. They were written on parchment made from animal skin, which is quite laborious to produce. Of course, they were all handwritten. Perhaps one of the books was a psalter, a book of the Psalms, and perhaps there were other devotional religious books. We don't know whether perhaps there might even have been some literature, perhaps written in Old English.
Now, we also know that some manuscripts, which apparently were blank, were not so blank after all. And there's one particular example which led you to a really fascinating story about women in Cornwall, slave women in Cornwall.
That's right. In the British Library, we have a manuscript, the Bodmin Gospels, which has some apparently blank pages in it. And recently, prompted by inquiries from a scholar, two of my colleagues investigated this manuscript using multispectral imaging. And on the blank page of this gospel book, through multispectral imaging, we were able to recover copies of 5 documents known as manumissions, which are documents recording the freeing of slaves. And this is shown in the exhibition on a screen, and it's really incredible. 1 minute you can't see anything on the page, and then with this imaging, these 5 new documents are brought to life. And I think that brings us back to the evidence, the original evidence for the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. And, you know, we discover new evidence through metal detectorist finds and archaeological discoveries, but there are also new things to be found in manuscripts, and these documents in the manuscript give us the names of people from the lowest level of society, evidence about which is the hardest to recover, really. And we have the name of a woman from Cornwall who is not recorded in any other source.
I did do history A-level, and I don't remember, I went to a girls' school, I don't remember us asking questions about the absence of women in the syllabus. And I know we should have done.
That was my experience as well. I went to a girls' school.
Right, but we didn't.
Exactly,
and we were taught about men.
Yeah, we were too. And in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms exhibition, there are lots of famous men in there. There's Bede and Alcuin, Alfred and Offa and Canute and William the Conqueror. There are all these famous men, and I think in the sources, the men's voices are the loudest. But throughout the exhibition, you can see evidence of stories about women and some evidence of women themselves being able to read and write. There's a prayer book in the exhibition, the Book of Nunnaminster, where some of the prayers are written in Latin with feminine endings for the word. So that suggests that the readers, at least, of that book were women, and it's possible that that book was owned by Aelswith, the wife of King Alfred, because at the end of the book is copied the boundaries of a piece of land that she owned. So it's completely circumstantial evidence, but it's a suggestion that this book may have been owned by the wife of Alfred the Great.
Wow. Do you know, I didn't even know Alfred the Great's wife's name.
No.
It was again?
Aylesworth.
It's not going to catch on, that one, is it? I can't see Aylesworth making a comeback, but I suppose you never know. Alfred's very much still around, which probably is a good indication of, we remember him and we didn't know she existed.
That's right. And Athelflaed, it's...
that one definitely won't catch on.
Well, this year, 2018, it's 1,100 years since her death in 918, and that has been was marked earlier in the year. And she's a very interesting woman. She's the daughter of King Alfred and known as the Lady of the Mercians, and she's the only woman in Anglo-Saxon England who rules in her own right, and we only really know so much about her because of the Mercian Register, which was incorporated into the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. And the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle exists in different manuscripts, and the primary manuscript almost writes her out of the story. It's written from the West Saxon perspective. The West Saxons were governed at that time by King Edward, her brother, and Athelflaed doesn't really feature, but in the Mercian Register, which was incorporated into one of the manuscripts in the exhibition we have on display, we can see Athelflaed fighting against Viking and Welsh raiders, leading armies. She was fortifying towns such as Tamworth and Stafford. She managed to reconquer Derby and Leicester from the Vikings and extended her power up to York. And, she was this really remarkable woman leader, and uniquely past her, when she died, she was succeeded by her daughter.
Oh, that sounds to me like a mini-series, and I don't mean that in a fatuous way, although it sounded very fatuous. I think that's those are the sort of stories that our daughters need to be told. Frankly, that's fascinating, Claire. Thank you very much. We're moving seamlessly back on to the subject of Michelle Obama, who I think will be recorded by history for all sorts of reasons, because, well, she clearly has had a monumental impact. Kelechi Okafor is here now as well. How would you like to be... What's your title today, Kelechi? Because last time you read was the tarot cards you did with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you want to be styled for this podcast?
Actor's fine.
Actor?
Yeah, and podcaster.
You don't want to... Oh, you want to mention your podcast?
Yeah.
Apparently it's called, I'm reading it here, Say Your Mind.
Yes, that's the official.
There are loads of really good podcasts, fortunately for us at the moment, aren't there? Just put that one in. Nobody, hopefully, will leave that in the podcast here. Let's talk about your view of Michelle Obama, because Clarissa, who's also still here, has met her. Would you like to meet her? Would you go to this event if you could?
If I could, I would. If I could go to see Michelle Obama, because she's in conversation with Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
It's a hell of a lineup.
Oh my God! And Chimamanda is my sister in my head, so I would love to see the both of them. But I'd love to see Michelle Obama for what she stands for. So poised and graceful. I need some of that.
Is there a but, or are you completely on board with the Obamas? I'm
on board with Michelle Obama. Barack Obama, I am critical of him the way that I've been critical of most other presidents, most other prime ministers. The way that I see it is that, we often get excited when we have the first black somebody, or the first woman to do something. And what this means is that we kind of turn a blind eye to the atrocities that are committed in our name, just because we're seeing these faces there. That's my only thing about it. But Michelle Obama, I think she humanized the campaign. She added, like I said, a grace to it, a poise to it that enamored me. Yeah. And otherwise, I don't think I would have been interested.
Here's a point from Sophie on Twitter, who says, how about the white middle-class women who've somehow managed to buy tickets for this event, donating them to BAME women through an organisation like Galdem? That would be a start. That's Sophie's view. I mean, I just put the point, perhaps rather clumsily, that maybe the audience there will be dominated by, let's be honest, the sort of people you might expect to see at events like that.
Yeah, and I think that that's ironic that so many white middle-class women want to go to this event, because they feel that, I can't generalise as it were, but a lot of the conversations that I see happening, especially around mainstream feminism or white feminism, is that
BAME women are often ignored. And so they want to go to this event and say, you know, I'm not racist, you know, I love Michelle Obama, I love the Obamas. But the fact of the matter is the black women or the women of colour that they interact with on a day-to-day basis, they're not showing them that level of respect. Is still the same micro and macro aggressions that we're still facing, but okay, it's fine because they love Michelle. I feel like more BAME women are the ones that need to see Michelle. If you don't see it, you can't be it. So that's what we need.
It's a line we've trotted out on this show over decades. What do you think about that, Clarissa?
I think I agree.
By the way, I should say I would love to go to that event, but just to out myself as somebody who would white middle class liberal, so I would love to go. But
I think about this in the perspective of audiences. So for me, I think regardless of how the media or certain organisations want to package and make, as you say, sort of brand Obama sort of palatable or more humanised, I think that ultimately if you listen to what Michelle says and her message and her story, she's speaking to specific group of people. So regardless of you know the makeup of that audience, I think her messages are going to be really clear. And I would say that a more interesting question around that audience is who are the people that are involved in that packaging or that marketing. And if obviously those people themselves are of that same white, you know, liberal middle class, then it's not unsurprising that they would choose to partner with organisations or work and put you know, these people in these spaces that speak to those audiences. And obviously I think a solution to change that is around getting more specifically black women within the industry as a whole, because if you have more commissioning editors, if you have more publishers, more marketeers, more publicists working who have different backgrounds and different ways of thinking, then they're going to think to include and prioritise certain audiences because of the meaning that they have specifically.
Let's say,
like Michelle.
By the wonders of connections, I get offered a ticket. Should I go? Or should I give it to someone else?
I would say, right, what would you want to get from going, and then what would you do after going?
You've got me, because what I want to get from going is saying, oh yes, and, I've been, and oh yes, you know, I've got friends who are, you know, it's pathetic.
But you know, and you know that, and the thing is, I know that most women want to go for that reason.
Yeah, but does that mean I shouldn't go? I mean, I'm not going, I should say, to be clear about it.
No, I feel that, you know, we can't say whether you should or shouldn't, but for me, I would have felt a more immediate desire to go, because I suffered a miscarriage earlier on this year, and I was shocked at the amount that we don't speak about it. And then I turn on my phone or whatever, and then I see Michelle Obama having a discussion about this very thing. That's a black woman who everyone sees as successful, and you know, she's in the highest office in the world, effectively.
Well, no, I mean that was the point that Clarissa made on the show, wasn't it? That she is, because I know you, Kelechi, had issues, and you weren't actually here at 10 o'clock, but Clarissa did say this, and it's really important to make it clear that here's a woman who appears to have risen to the just about the top, the partner of the man at the top, which is something else that, of course, she wasn't actually president herself, but she's had terrible challenges, not been as seamless as you might have thought.
And I think that that's important, especially when black women specifically, get the strong black woman trope. It's understanding that you can be strong and be tender, and that's what came across with that. And so I just feel that those are things that speak to me. The fact that, you know, this is a woman who is married to the most powerful, or was, you know, married to the most powerful man in the world before, and she's still called an ape in heels by other people who should be showing her respect. So if that kind of power, she can still get the same racist tropes that I get on a daily basis. I feel that when she's speaking to essentially people like myself who would really need to have that as something that kind of drives us on and motivates us, whereas the average person that's likely to be in that audience, they've never experienced that. So to them, it's just like, wow, well done, she's risen above it. But we feel it. It's a visceral kind of experience that we would have from being there.
Clarissa, quick word.
Yeah, I think having met her and spoken with her, I do think there is, as Kelechi mentioned, a very specific feeling you get. And I know on a personal level, the sense of self-belief and confidence that sometimes can be lacking when you're a young woman, but specifically as a young black woman, I personally got that from her. And I think the fact that someone who is in her position and who has achieved so much within her own right, so obviously we've spoken about her being married to Barack Obama, but to achieve what she has achieved in some of the top elite institutions as a black woman, you see the possibility, I think. And I think for her, part of her whole mission as the First Lady, but outside of that, has been about entering spaces, so going into schools, speaking with young women, speaking to people who have backgrounds similar to her and delivering that message. And I think she'll do that wherever she is.
Yeah. Thank you both very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks to you, Claire, as well, for hanging around.
Thank you.
And I just need to mention we had some really interesting tweets and emails about the conversation about There She Goes. This is from Susie. I've watched There She Goes. It is my life. Very close to home, but well done and written by somebody going through it. Also, finding swimming nappies for incontinent children like my 10-year-old is a nightmare. This is anonymous. As the ex-partner to the mother of a child whose learning disabilities mirror Rosie's in There She Goes, I can confirm the accuracy of the portrayal. At times, I almost feel as though I'm watching a documentary. These hidden lives have stories to tell that rarely are told, and There She Goes does so with a truth that might be uncomfortable, but it's clear to anybody who's experienced this situation that only somebody who has could have written this series. From Jenny, I hated the programme. I thought the acting was naff and the script was lazy. I have never heard a parent in my position refer to their child as a simple mind, not even in jest. I hated that. Also, most parents I know do not talk about their children as if they cannot hear or do not understand what is being said. Strangers, friends and relatives do that, but not most parents in my experience. Well, as I say, various opinions on that, and we thank you all for bothering to share your thoughts with us. As ever, you're welcome to do so via the website bbc.co.uk/Woman's Hour. The programme is back tomorrow, and the podcast, of course. Amongst other things, we're talking about children and laughter.
Hello, I'm Matthew Price. Sorry to jump in on your podcast. First, I wanted to tell you that alongside Tina Dahealy, I'm hosting the Beyond Today podcast from the BBC. And each weekday, we're going to be tackling some of the biggest news stories with help from some of the best and most informed journalists in the BBC. It's the news podcast that's going to jump right in to give you just that little bit more. So make sure you head over to the BBC Sounds app, search for Beyond Today and subscribe. And if you'd like to join in the chat, use the hashtag BBC Beyond. Sorry for that interruption. On with your podcast.